Hello everybody, in today's video I wanted to take a little bit of time and talk about ground war, and specifically we're going to take a look at how the spawns work on this specific mode, as well as how to take advantage of those with certain power positions so you can maximize those kills and minimize those deaths. And one of the main reasons I wanted to cover the different information I'm going to cover within the video is because I was getting several comments of people struggling to get long shots in the Damascus video and they've never actually played ground war. And I was asking, well, why aren't you playing ground war? What are the issues with it? What are you struggling to understand that you don't actually enjoy playing ground war? And the majority of the people came back saying that, hey, you know what? I have a problem with snipers, the tanks, the camping. I don't really understand how to control the map. There was a lot of variables thrown out there, and a majority of the stuff really comes down to not knowing how to play the map. And I'm going to go ahead and break down some of those things in today's video. Hopefully you guys do enjoy it. If you do, let me know by hitting that like button. And if you're brand new to the channel or just haven't yet subscribed, I definitely consider subscribing with notifications on if you're looking to find your way back to the channel. So when it comes to the spawns for ground war, it's actually relatively easy to understand. All you really have to understand is where your basic headquarters spawn is at the edge of the map. Obviously, you're going to go ahead and spawn on one side of the map at the start of a map, and then you're going to run out and you're either going to grab A or E, and depending on what side you're spawning on initially is going to determine the spawns for the rest of the match. And then understanding that part of it will lead to understanding how the power positions work based off which specific flags are held by your team. And normally, just like a domination match, you're going to want to hold on to your home flag, which in this case, if you're spawning on the E side, you're going to want to go ahead and grab the E flag, and then you're going to want to grab the D flag and the C flag, and pretty much hold those three flags for the entire match. You're not going to want to go ahead and reach around and try and grab the A flag, which you can see my team is currently doing. That is a big no-no when you're playing domination. And the same goes for ground war. You don't want to actually have a random flag at the other side of the map. What you do want is you want all of your flags touching and to have one side of the map. And we're going to look at two different gameplays. Obviously, the one right now we're looking at is on farmland. I don't really have to do a ton of babysitting. And in the second match, we'll see a little bit more of that babysitting. And what I mean by that is we're trying to get it to that point that I was just talking about, where you have A, B, and C, or E, D, and C. And I think a lot of times people don't really understand this concept, and that's why it ends up feeling like you're in a running simulator sometimes. Because if your team ends up capping a certain flag, that's going to push all the enemies to a certain section of the map, or it's going to split up the enemies to too many different areas of the map, so it doesn't feel like you're actually running into a lot of people. But when you control the map the proper way, you will tend to go on longer streaks, have better feeds, and have more consistent games where you're easily going to go over 50, and then if the game really plays out really well, you'll probably get 100+ gameplay. So I'm going to bring up a graphic that shows how the spawns work on this specific map, but if you can understand this concept, you should be able to carry over the same logic to any other ground war map, and that'll also give you a better idea on what power positions are based off the specific spawns. So the first thing we're going to look at is there's a green region at the top, and then there's this pinkish purple region at the bottom, and those are going to be the home spawns or designated home spawns. And then for each of the individual flags, you can see that there's a little circle around them, and then there's a semicircle that is different colored. What you're looking at here is the specific spawns for each side of the map. If you happen to spawn on the green side of the map at the start of the map, all of your spawns on the individual flags will be those green areas if you hold them, and vice versa on that purple side. And obviously that's in addition to people using tack inserts or spawning on their teammate. But if someone is spawning on a specific flag, which is a majority of the time where people will tend to spawn, you're going to have a good idea of where people should be coming out of and where they should be running through. And that will allow you to position yourself in certain buildings based off which particular flags are kept and which side of the map your team is actually holding. So right now you can see that we do not have the good spawns. I'm coming up trying to take C, and then after I would have eventually taken C, I would have pushed over to D. Hopefully the enemy team retakes A and B, and then that puts us in a normal position where you have a good understanding of where people should be spawning from. If the map gets kind of out of wild like this is what causes people to camp on the outskirts and snipe and get away with it for a long period of time, because there's people scattered all the way around and you don't know where people are coming from. Obviously the matches are 32 versus 32, so it's not like you're expected to be able to do everything by yourself. In some scenarios, it just won't happen. But there's certain times where you're able to hold a specific flag, and then that'll kind of influence the way your team plays the specific objective, at least for that particular moment, because that'll influence the individual spawns. So right here, I'm just trying to recapture C. They end up taking that guy out. There was a guy still in the corner, and it doesn't look like any teammates are pushing up. Looks like there is a guy coming up behind me, so obviously I got to be aware of that. And I end up trying to lock down the position. It's just too many angles for one person to hold. So every lobby is a little bit different. Some people will play the objective more than others. Some will play it not at all. So you kind of just got to deal with that as you go. One thing to keep in mind though is that once you start understanding how the spawns work and starting to figure out, hey, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and position myself in this particular area because this is probably a good power position, you'll slowly notice that enemies start doing the same thing, and you can kind of start to predict where enemies will be as soon as you spawn in, because they're probably sitting in one of those power positions. You got to kind of learn how to take those individuals out. So we were able to do pretty well. Even though I carried a bulk of the load, we still ended up winning the match. It was a close match, but you can see I was able to get around 56 kills and 7 captures. So I was actually having to do a lot more capture work than I would like to do, and this could have been an easily 70, 80, 90 plus game if I only focused on getting kills. So it's kind of one of those things, as you learn, if the teammates cooperate, then you can kind of work around with that. You can see that this is a late start match in progress, and we pretty much don't have any of the flags. Half the match is already over. So again, I'm going to have to babysit just a little bit more, where I'm focusing on grabbing certain flags that will manipulate the spawns, so I can hopefully have enough time to get in a power position, start to streak up, call on my streaks, and hopefully rack up a ton of kills. So all I'm doing right now is I just have to post up and sit at the D flag because my team is about to get DEFCON. You can see that they're also capturing C at the same time, so that's always a good plus when we're trying to get those flag captures. And then you're going to see right here that I'm thinking, okay, well, which flag is left over to grab? And then I start positioning myself where I can actually start going for E. So I moved across the map. Our team is losing D, and then we starting to gain it back. One of those things, you end up getting it contested back and forth, and people tend to fight for certain objectives more than others, and it really depends on the map. Right here, we're pushing up. There's a lot of teammates. I take the guy out. I push up and really just focusing on securing that flag. So even though I've only been in the match a little while, you can see I've already had a significant influence on the flags that we were able to capture. And what you're ideally looking for is your team to hold this set of flags for approximately 60 seconds or so. And what that'll do is lead to really consistent spawning by the enemy team. And that's going to go back to what I was talking about earlier. People could obviously spawn an attack insert, or they could spawn in on a teammate. Usually within a minute's time, anyone that was kind of freely moving around the map is going to be killed. They're going to be flushed out by your entire team, and they are going to be forced to spawn on one of their flags or their headquarters. And normally people are going to go ahead and spawn on a specific flag, because there's no point in spawning your headquarters then running all the way through a flag you've captured. So in this particular scenario, if we would have held on to C, the enemy team would have been forced to only spawn at A. You could position yourself at B on top of the building, kind of shoot them as they're coming out of spawn, position you somewhere around the building, and you've been able to get a ton of kills. With this particular scenario, a lot of the enemies are going to be spawning on C because they're going to push out and probably go ahead and try and push on B, or try and recapture D, as you see is getting contested right now. So right now I'm kind of in a hot spot where I can actually be hit from multiple angles until we actually capture the C flag. There's not a ton of power positions except for maybe being on top of the building, watching people run out from C to D, or if the enemy team has D, them running out from D and you catching them off guard because you're on top of the building. So obviously you want to influence the spawns as much as you can, and there's a lot that goes into it. People think you're just running around wild. You really can't do much when you're playing ground war, and they only end up getting 10 kills or single digits in an entire match of ground war, and that should almost never happen. I started in this match late. I'm gonna end up with over 20 plus kills, and I didn't have a lot of time, and I was running around, and I was never really in a power position. I didn't really make it in a power position because I kind of started the match late and I couldn't get to the locations I wanted. You can see exactly what I was kind of talking about is panning out now, where the enemy team jumped on C. Then they go ahead and jump over to D, and we were able to capture C. And you can see a lot of the enemies are flooding out at D, and I ended up getting killed by a straggler that was left over from that initial capture that was still on top of C. Which goes a little bit back to what I was talking about earlier, holding the specific flags for a good amount of time which will end up clearing out those stragglers, because obviously that guy killed me, then he'll probably end up getting killed by one of my teammates. It's kind of just one of those things until they all get flooded out and you have very predictable spawns. Unfortunately, right at the end, my team ended up losing pretty much every flag as I rushed over to B, and we end up getting a draw. So that's kind of just a basic intro to how ground war spawns work, and we'll go ahead and kind of dive a little bit more into power positions. If you guys enjoy this type of video, please let me know by hitting the like button. If you're brand new to the channel, just haven't yet subscribed, definitely consider subscribing with notifications on so you'll be able to find your way back to the channel. Also, if there's any additional questions you have about ground war, make sure you leave those down in the comments section so I can go ahead and kind of see if there's a big enough interest to actually make a video on those. We appreciate all the support on the channel. Thank you for watching. As always, have a great day.